and welcome to the 3 a.m. News, where none of us really know what's going on. And tonight we're talking about net neutrality, and have a whole stack of people that are going to talk tonight. What the heck is net neutrality? Give me that thing. Okay, so net neutrality, according to the interwebs, is a principle that internet service providers and governments should treat all data on the internet equally. So they're not discriminating or charging differently by user, content, site, platform, application, blah, 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 blah. Well, now that we kind of have our ducks in a row, I just want to introduce Adam Steigers, just an average guy from Alabama that would like to give us some thoughts on what he thinks about net neutrality and using the internet. So, Adam, I guess, what do you think about, net neutrality as an average person?
Well, I don't think I should be paying that much for that there internet. Really, I don't really like it when they charge me to click on the big blue E thing. I do like watching their cat videos on the YouTubes. Netflix is always nice. Don't really know what else to do on the internet. My wife goes to Pinterest. I don't care too much for that.
Also, do you feel like large companies and the government are trying to control the internet? Like they're trying to put their own priorities out there for us?
Well, them internet places charge me a whole lot of money. Really, I feel like the government should be staying out of it because I don't like the whole idea of them spying on us. And really, the more the government stays out of our lives, the better. Thanks, Obama.
Next up, we have Tony Campbell. And just saying that makes me kind of hungry. So, Tony, what's your stance on net neutrality? I know you do a lot with putting information out on the internet and any content, anything from videos to games to music to questionable stuff. But I guess, what do you think on this?
I'm definitely for net neutrality. It's part of what made it great in the first place. Without net neutrality, you wouldn't have Wikipedia, YouTube, Netflix, any of the sites that people go to frequently.
Also, how feasible do you think it is to create a state of net neutrality? Something that is actually sustainable?
It's definitely feasible to create a state of net neutrality. That's basically what the internet is at right now. And this is one of the reasons that the ISPs are saying, well, that's why we don't need net neutrality. It's fine on its own. We don't need to regulate it. But we're starting to see more of the ISPs kind of cash grabs. They're making people pay for how much data they use. They're monitoring what kind of data they're using.
What effect do you think that net neutrality will have on businesses and sales and the economy in general?
Net neutrality has had an overwhelmingly positive effect on businesses. It doesn't have the usual barriers to entry that you'd see in a brick-and-mortar store, for example. All you need is a good idea and a little tiny bit of money to start up a web server, and if the public likes it, it's going to take off. That's why you have sites like YouTube.
So from what we've been looking at, it can be quite profitable for different companies who are controlling the internet to have a little bit less net neutrality out there. But what do you think the public opinion would be on these companies if they started controlling the internet more? And how much would it really hurt business or help it to have such a public opinion?
At first, they're going to see huge profit, but after a while, like I said, people are going to get upset, they're going to make alternatives, and this is going to cause them to actually hurt themselves. So they need to realize what they think is just going to be a quick cash grab is going to hurt them and everybody else on the internet.
And next up we have someone from the FCC. This guy's name is David Flash? David Flash. We're going to go with that. So, David, what is the FCC's stance on net neutrality as a major part of the government?
We at the FCC support net neutrality. We have since the beginning. Our open internet rules provide a level playing field where consumers are free to choose the services that are best for them.
And does net neutrality have any effect on the economy? Or does it really hunt business?
Hurts. It's hurt.
Oh, sorry. Does net neutrality hurt business?
Fix your handwriting.
Our open internet rules are designed to promote competition between internet services to benefit both businesses and consumers.
And now for a brief intermission, here's Jill with the weather.
It's really freaking cold out here. Can I come inside the studio, please?
And welcome back to the 3 a.m. news, where no one really knows what the heck is going on. And up next we have John Burgundy, who's from one of the local internet service providers, or ISPs for those of you from Alabama. And I guess, John, what do you have against net neutrality? I know we talked a little bit about this before the show, but what really is bad about it?
Net neutrality is anti-innovation and limits investment. The prioritization of bandwidth is essential for future innovation on the internet. The revenue we could receive from providing tiered services would allow us to increase our coverage. Net neutrality limits our innovation in the market and makes it more difficult for us to recoup our investments in our networks, and gives us no incentive to make large investments in improving our network. Net neutrality is holding back progress in America.
And John, how would legislation be passed to regulate net neutrality? And how could the government do anything to really help or hinder it?
Creating a state of net neutrality legally is not feasible. If legislation is not conceived correctly, it can make it difficult for us to legally combat denial of service attacks, filter spam emails, and helping to prevent computer viruses.
John, as an internet service provider, you have customers that you have to deal with, and you have to make them happy. So, I guess, how do you defend your position to customers that may not agree with you on this?
Our customers would be best served without net neutrality. There is no need to force us to be neutral when a neutral public option would incentivize competition. Paid prioritization of bandwidth can induce optimal welfare in the ISP market competition.
I guess the last question I have for you then, John, is what effect does net neutrality have on businesses that use your services?
Net neutrality would prevent more broadband networks from being built, which would limit the available bandwidth. We should have the right to charge companies that use massive amounts of bandwidth, such as YouTube. Without the money to develop new fiber optic networks, thousands of businesses will be held back. All this innovation will die.
For our last guest this morning thing, we're just very honored to have a guest from the UN. I mean, seriously, she's pretty important. And she's here to talk to us more about net neutrality and the UN stance on it. And her name is Charlene Schwab. Sounds very proper. But I guess, Charlene, what is your stance on net neutrality? And as a liaison from the UN and all this important stuff, what do you have to say on this?
Well, I've travelled quite a long way to be here, and I'm very excited to share the UN's current stance on net neutrality, which is...
Good evening, sheeple. I come before you now to pose a simple question. Why should the owners of our vital infrastructure be allowed to do with it as they please, at the cost of everything we, as internet users, hold dear? Consider for a moment the late Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska, who famously made terrible arguments in opposition to net neutrality. I give you his own words here, as they do an even better job of torpedoing his argument than I ever could hope to do.
10 movies streaming across that internet, and what happens to your own personal internet? I just the other day got internet was sent by my staff at 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday. I got it yesterday. And again, the internet is not something that you just dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes.
So here we see Stevens trying poorly to argue that network congestion is a problem affecting all internet users. If you look at it superficially, it's maybe a little bit accurate, but not really at all if you know what's going on. As an individual, I'm certainly well aware of how my internet connection works, and many of you out there in TV land are probably familiar with something similar. The limiting factor for your own internet connection is not what's upstream of you. It is your own internet connection. If somebody in your house, for example, is streaming a movie and you want to play a fast-paced game to kill some Chinese people, well, performance of your game may not be very good. But on your own end, there are ways to ensure that performance remains acceptable for everybody trying to use your connection. Roughly the same situation applies to ISPs. They can at least make things fair by allocating equal amounts of bandwidth to everybody. They're still limited, perhaps, by their connections to other ISPs, but there's nothing stopping them from giving everybody an equal share of bandwidth, except the part where they want more of your money. Isn't that interesting? That said, what might happen if we let our ISPs and the content cartels make a non-neutral internet? In perhaps the worst case, the current bastion of free speech and egalitarianism that is today's internet becomes another form of television, where subscribers pay some amount of money to receive exactly what the businesses owning the internet connection want them to receive. There may still be some ability to reach what is the current internet, but it would undoubtedly be expensive. And of course, why? Why would they let you have access to that when they already have your money and no real reason to let you do anything else? Further consider what might happen to your own privacy in a situation where you must pay for the privilege to access unusual parts of the internet, what you want, rather than what the corporations want you to see. In any technical implementation of this system, there must be a way to track what you are looking at. Well, I guess if you don't care about privacy, that's okay. And of course, everybody has nothing to hide, correct? I know I, myself, have nothing to hide. So, gentle sheeple, if you see what I see, and you feel what I feel, we must act together to protect our own precious internet, our own personal internet, as Mr. Stevens might have said. We must work and save the internet as we know it from the evil corporate cartels. We can do that, well, in a number of interesting fashions. But I would urge you to encourage our own government to make these things right.
And that's the UN's stance.
Well, sorry about that. The little interruption that we have going here. So, I guess you heard all you need to hear from the UN. They are pretty neutral on net neutrality anyway. And again, I just want to apologize to you, our viewers, for the slight interruption by our strange visitor. And just so you know, this is the 3 a.m. news. We really have no idea what's going on. And these things happen all the time.